Hi, this is Taryn Lupo, and welcome back to the audio book of Pirates of Savannah, Chapter 10. Please enjoy, and if you want to support me, remember you can always buy this, a commercial-free version, at lupolilink.com, or feel free to make a donation. Enjoy.
Chapter 10. Jenkins' Ear. After the duel and ensuing trial, Isaac had become a new fixture at the Freeman home during his free time. His name had become a local legend in the Jewish community, and his bravery reflected well upon Dr. Nunes. Benevolently, the good doctor gave Isaac ample time to recover the use of his right hand and arm. Patrick found a sort of inner peace after the duel. Normally, he was against all forms of violence, but this was not a street mugging or bullying. This was a voluntary battle, which he was the victor, and that fact made the death of Potts and Edgington easier to bear. Both men were healing quickly, which was a miracle. Many shot wounds were met with amputation, or were a short boat ride to the devil. Years of living in putrid filth had made their bodies very resilient to disease. Maximilian removed his worm successfully. It took 3 long weeks of slow half-turns of the stick, but he removed the worm without killing it. He even dried it in the sun and used it for bragging rights to his friends. Amos was not as fortunate. His foot festered, and he had been fighting the infection for weeks. Many times, Dr. Nunes wanted to amputate, but Amos refused and bore the infection. It was a long, drawn-out case of sepsis that never really became full-blown. The infection would grow fierce, and then the next day it would recede. Even though he was very ill, he still snuck out to the river to fish every day when his fever would wane. Amos soon realized his infection felt better every time he soaked it in the cool river. Archibald surmised that the cold water had helped the swelling, or perhaps the brackish salt water cleansed the infection. Whatever the cause, after several weeks his foot returned to normal and the family was relieved. With the mending health of the 4 young men, the next weeks were uneventful and a happy time for the Freeman home. News had been trickling in from all corners that trouble was brewing once again between England and Spain. Patrick asked Archibald to explain the history of the English and Spanish animosity. Being locked deep in a dank debtor's dungeon, Patrick was mostly unaware of the happenings of the outside world during the time he spent. Archibald happily explained what he knew.
The Spanish hate the English as far back as I can remember. Many years back, when I was a child, the 2 countries made a trade agreement. If I recall, it was called the Treaty of Utrecht, which gave Britain a 30-year asiento.
Asiento? Patrick questioned.
It's a Spanish word. It means the Spanish government gave permission for other countries to sell slaves to the Spanish colonies. Slavery, being a very profitable business, encouraged many English traders to jump on the opportunity to make fortunes.
Archibald continued.
But it was not a treaty that held too well. Britain and Spain were at each other's throats and constantly fought, so it became common for the Spanish ships to attack the British vessels and steal their cargoes. Now England is throbbing at the mouth like a mad dog for war, to have an excuse to rob ships of the Spanish. They, and by they, I mean the politicians, even dug up some poor bloke named Captain Jenkins, a pawn, if you will. They dragged the poor bastard onto the floor of Parliament in the House of Commons to tell a story of his ear and his ship, the Rebecca. It seems the sorry bloke was captured by a Spaniard named Captain Fandino, who accused Jenkins of piracy and sliced off his ear. He told the men,
"Go tell your king I do the same if he dares do the same."
So the politicos in London propped up this sorry man and made him recite his sordid story to affirm that the Spanish threatened his royal majesty. I hear that Jenkins actually pulled out his own mummified ear to display to the esteemed council.
Archibald laughed.
Foul, eh? Of course,
Archibald continued,
the shite rolls down from the top of the mountain, and this silly political chess match is rearing its ugly head in the colonies. A soldier in town told me the other day that rumors are circling that the Crown is centralizing forces here in Savannah. Governor Oglethorpe has sent word to the 42nd Foot Regiment, as well as the Georgia and Carolina militias, ordering them to assemble in Savannah. There must be truth to these rumors. I've received orders from the governor myself to start making cannonballs and shot. Something grievous is definitely coming this way. On a good note, Archibald's tone lightened as he leaned close to Patrick. We are having a clandestine meeting tonight, up the stairs in this very house. You're welcome to invite your friend Isaac. He has proven he is metal worthy of trust, but tell no other soul. The meeting will commence an hour after sunset.
Patrick then made off to round up Isaac. Although he was uncomfortable not knowing any details, Patrick had been able to convince Isaac into coming along. If anyone else but Patrick had extended such a mysterious invitation, Isaac would have declined, suspecting foul play. When they returned to the Freeman property, the two men spied Mariana and Heather standing in the shadows of the yard as lookout sentries. Isaac was taken aback by the two women acting as security, but Patrick assured him everything was fine. Curiosity was growing in the large man. Marian whispered from the shadows, "They're waiting. Knock twice, then once, then thrice." The two men made their way into the tiny house, then up the ladder to the loft, and rapped on the trap door. The trapdoor swung open, and the two men ascended into the loft with but one candle to light their way. 4 men and 2 boys sat in a tight circle. Archibald rose, inviting them to sit in this secret circle. But Isaac was so large, he seemed as if he would take up half the circle himself.
Welcome to the Freeman Society,
Archibald announced warmly.
We are a network of men who believe that a man is only subject to himself. We believe a man to be sovereign to himself, and not a king or a ruler of any kind. We also believe the individual knows best how to control his own life and make their own fortune, and not anyone else. We can tell you more, much more. But first you have to enter this circle of trust on your own free will and accord. Do you wish to continue?
Archibald questioned solemnly. How could I possibly agree to honor something before I know what it is? Patrick pressed. You've got to tell me something.
We're at an impasse. Archibald frowned. We cannot tell you any of our secrets until I know you can be trusted. Most secret societies work the same way, Patrick. In fact, a Freemason will not tell you any details about who they are until after you take a pledge of secrecy first. It is how it is done. Trust, the blacksmith explained, begins with you.
Patrick and Isaac looked at each other in the dim candlelight, judging how the other would respond. Both men nodded in approval to each other, then turned to the men in the circle and stated in unison, We do.
Very well. You are welcome to this circle of trust, founded on the ideas of personal liberty and sovereignty. Here, you can allow your true mind to be free. Speak what you will. You can ask any question, challenge any idea or belief without fear of reprisal. But there is a price for this freedom of mind and spirit. You must never speak of this group to any soul without asking the permission of its members first. You hold the lives of these men and their families in your hands, as they hold your lives in theirs. Do you understand the full importance of this vow you are about to make to us?
Archibald asked both men in turn, and Isaac and Patrick both nodded in acknowledgement.
Then show your vow by wearing these.
Archibald presented ribbons of black and yellow cloth to Patrick and Isaac. They were instructed to tie the black cloth around their right arms, to seal the two men to their vow of secrecy and act as a reminder that a loose tongue would bring death to all they knew and loved. They were told to tie the yellow ribbon around their left arms, to seal the vow and follow the path of enlightenment. The yellow was symbolic of the sun washing away the darkness of other people's ideas that attempt to control their lives. After the ribbons were tied to both of their arms, a small group circled on the floor and chanted,
The only ideas we accept are the ones that benefit our happiness. We will always work toward breaking the chains of an enslaved mind. So mote it be. Pay attention, lads, Archibald warned. This is the secret handshake of the Freeman Society.
He then locked his wrist to Patrick's wrist and formed a V with his index and middle fingers, laying them on Patrick's forearm.
There.
Archibald shook Patrick's hand and motioned to Isaac.
Now practice this with your brother.
After the two successfully mastered the secret handshake with each other, Archibald stood between the two men, took them by their shoulders, and turned them towards the circle.
Gentlemen,
Archibald announced,
let me proudly introduce Sovereign Willis and Sovereign Schwartz to the circle.
The men circled on the loft floor of the Freeman home all nodded as Archibald gestured to the gentlemen sitting.
To my right is Sovereign Quinn. You know his daughter Prudence. To my left is Sovereign Dandridge, Mariana's father. The gentleman wearing my clan's kilt is Sovereign Mackintosh, which you've already met. I also think you already know the twins, Sovereign Freeman and Sovereign Freeman. Archibald grinned.
Archibald, Patrick, and Isaac then joined the circle and sat upon the floor. The wigged blacksmith stated that the meeting would begin with news from other Freeman societies and end upon the studying of the writings of John Locke. He turned and asked his brother, Sovereign Mackintosh, of news from the Scottish settlement of Darien, Georgia. Mackintosh cleared his throat and spoke. Many tongues have run from the clans in Darien. The governor is about to call his markers and command us to fight for him. We understood what the exchange for the passage here in the land was. The Scots will come to aid him if he calls. Something be brewing, laddie. Mackintosh leaned towards the circle, emphasizing his grim words. The clans be preparing for war, just not knowing where or why yet. All men of fighting age are to ascend on Savannah when the alarm be sounded. What do you think Oglethorpe is planning, Mr. Mackintosh? Patrick asked earnestly.
Lad,
Archibald interrupted,
it is our custom not to use Mr. or any title but Sovereign. It is a sign of respect as well as a reminder that the man you speak to is free and serves no one here.
Patrick sincerely apologized as Mackintosh continued. It probably has to do with that damn Jenkins eater. It is all the town to be speaking of. I will be betting we'll soon be fighting the Spanish for that Governor Oglethorpe. Sovereign Quinn injected. Lots of confusion and opportunity happens in battles. It could be a very profitable endeavor to our cause. If we could position ourselves near the battle, but not in it, we could scavenge a haul of muskets, munitions, and supplies, Sovereign Dandridge added. In all the confusion, none would be wiser to our deception.
Part of our discussion in this group talked about the ideas of property rights, Sovereign Dandridge.
Archibald warned.
It is immoral to steal another's property. Only two kinds of people use force to take what they want. Thieves and government. We need to take the higher ground here, gentlemen. We cannot take anything from another for any reason, no matter how noble our cause.
The British have enslaved and tortured our people since I can remember, brother, Sovereign Mackintosh posed. They steal our silver, our property, our freedom, our women, and our very lives. Is it immoral to take back your own stolen property? If a thief robs me, and then drops some of the silver on the ground as he runs away, is it immoral if I pick it up? The circle of men sat and pondered this question. Each looked at each other, weighing morality in the scales of their minds, when Sovereign Freeman finally conceded.
No, brother. Taking back my rightful property from a thief or a government is not stealing.
Sovereign Mackintosh grinned as Sovereign Quinn continued the reasoning. So, by that reasoning, I suppose taking the arms and supplies from fallen British soldiers would be moral. The government did steal our monies with those same guns to buy all the supplies they've outfitted their handsome army with. I would not see that as stealing, Sovereign Dandridge interjected. That is taking back your own money. But one would need to figure out exactly how much the Crown has indeed stolen from his life. and make sure they do not take 1 shilling more. Sovereign Mackintosh became visibly frustrated with this penny-pinching of morality when he asked empathetically, "And what be the exact price would you say the British owe me for killing me poor? Should I try to estimate exactly how much me poor father would have made tolling the rest of his life if he was spared? Exactly how much could I take from the rotten English till me clan be fully square?" Mackintosh was fuming. His brother sifted back a tear and asked calmly, "That's a very tough question, William. A very much the same dilemma as you well know. I would assume you should take as much as you want until you feel whole and compensated for your loss." Sovereign Dandridge patted Archibald's shoulder with compassion as he chimed in, "Then let us gain riches from the storm brewing. Let us scavenge the thieving British in their next fight. We need to position ourselves close to the action, but not in it. I say we hire a savage to guide us in and out of the bloodshed. The Redskins are experts at what we're proposing to do." "I know one we can trust," Sovereign Quint added. "He's a fur trader and keeps asking for my Prudence's hand. He'd be willing to do anything to get in my good graces. He's very old, though, but highly skilled. I'll contact him, determine if he will be able to assist us." "Sadly, lads, I don't think I can avoid the fighting part," Sovereign Mackintosh confessed. "Me clan gave its word to Oglethorpe to support him if he ever needs us. I have to fight or dishonor me family. I predict he's going to call us to arms soon enough. He visited Darien recently and showed us respect by wearing his kilt the whole time he was there. He even opted to sleep under the big oak tree with the rest of the men instead of sleeping in a bed. Showing his ugly knees and sleeping under an oak tree, the governor is making sure he is still in good favor with the clans. I'll help the cause any way I can from the battle lines. But—" Mackintosh hung his head slightly, but the men in the circle nodded that they understood. It would have been comforting to have a man with the ability of the lumbering Mackintosh along, but he was obviously honor-bound. Archibald then instructed each man to keep his ears pinned back and ready to jump when the coming battle arrives. Archibald inquired of the group who they preferred to study, Algernon Sidney or John Locke. Sovereign Quint proposed that Sidney was murdered by the government for his words and stated with a mischievous grin, "Let's find out what they didn't want us to know." With the group's approval of Sidney, Archibald reached into a secret compartment in the bottom of his bed frame at the far end of the loft and pulled out a buckskin bag. He opened the bag delicately, uncovering a very worn tome. He explained to the new brothers that these books of his were more dangerous to own than 100 cannons. If Governor Oglethorpe or his minions were to discover the Society's collection of writings, they'd all have their necks stretched and their toes dangling from a tree. He made the new recruits swear to never speak of them. He had paid a good bit of silver to a smuggler to get the books out of London, and they were the most valuable things he owned. The newly initiated members of the Secret Freeman Society nodded solemnly. Archibald then carefully parted the book open and read Sidney's words, reminding the gathering sovereign men as to exactly why the crown executed him in 1683.
"If there be no law in a kingdom than the will of a prince, then there is no such thing as liberty. Property is also an appendage to liberty, and 'tis impossible for a man to have the right of lands or goods if he has no liberty, and enjoys his life at the pleasure of another, as it is to enjoy either when he is deprived of them."
Archibald continued to read from Sidney's book for a while, and only stopped after a section which proposed the right to a revolution. The section always inspired the most debate amongst the secret circle of men. Isaac spoke first. He was trying to digest the words of the philosopher.
"So Sidney is saying revolution and freedom is closely linked. That when a people's rights and liberties are threatened, they have the right to rebel, nay, the duty to."
With no easy answers to such difficult questions, Maximilian asked another question. He seemed as perplexed as Isaac. "Does revolution always mean violence, Father?" Can we have a revolution with other ways?
No,
you have to have violence. The group began to talk over each other, each man offering their opinion, until Sovereign Dandridge spoke above the clutter. I have never heard of a non-violent revolution, but I suppose there could be one. Dandridge continued, proposing that if subjects stopped funding the king by stopping paying their taxes, that maybe the king could not afford his pretty crown that adorned his head, or his army to do his violent bidding. Many minds have to change to reject the king's authority before this could happen. It would be dangerous for those who are the first to protest, but eventually it would encourage others. If enough subjects stop funding the government that oppresses them, it should collapse the entire empire in financial ruin. Patrick had not considered these radical ideas before. Before it was just a vague anger, but now his thoughts were taking shape. He found it odd that throughout time, people have funded their own oppression, built the very chains that enslaved them. Patrick explored all these new ideas as the group clamored on, until Sovereign Quinn's voice cut through the others. Piss on that! The way to freedom is through the barrel of a musket. You cannot reason with evil nor violence. You must answer violence with greater violence. Shh! Worried that the neighbors might hear, or a passing British soldier, Archibald shushed the excited man. When the group was quiet again, Archibald rationalized in hushed tones. How can one find peace through violence, Sovereign Quinn? In the game of violence, the most violent is crowned the winner. Might makes right, not morality or reason. You, sir, would simply be trading one violent king for another more violent king. No, Sovereign Quinn countered. You don't understand. We simply need to install one of our own men. We just need to find the right man to lead us. We have to have someone lead us, otherwise we'd have anarchy, a society wrought with murder and thievery. Maybe a society with no ruler, no government, would have less murder and thievery. We have plenty of murder and thievery now. Hell, King George's troops killed more people than smallpox. Archibald laughed at his own joke. I don't know, Sovereign Freeman, Sovereign Quinn mused. 'Tis true enough we need some sort of government. Men are too evil to be trusted to their own reckonings. You need to use that reasoning a little deeper. You are saying that men are too evil to be trusted, but government is made up of men. So does something magical happen when they become the government that washes away that inborn evil? Lads, remember the most basic thing about all governments. Government is force. In its simplest form, it is one soul making another soul do what he wants by force. It rings true of any of the king's laws and actions. The only reason his subjects comply is because of threats of force hidden behind the law. So it is the musket in the room that demands obedience. He who has control of the gun cannot resist the temptation and power to use it. Archibald explained. He continued. So even if we fight like hell and throw the king and his corrupt government out of power, we're just handing the musket in the room to a new ruler. In time, they will not be able to resist the siren's call of its power, and will find a reason to justify using it. Perhaps a new ruler will only use the gun to keep the rest of us safe, and force his subjects to pay for a military. Maybe he'll force his subjects to pay for programs to help the kingdom and its people. Over time, the new ruler will find more and more reasons to use the musket to take his subjects' silver. When a government's only tool is threats and violence, then why is it so surprising to its subjects when they use it? If you only own a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Lads, that's why it is called a revolution, because it only goes in an endless circle of killing and control. When you use violence to remove a government, it is only a matter of time until the new government has to be removed with more violence, Archibald summarized. You're living in a world of fairies. You can't use non-violent methods at people willing to kill you. No thanks. This change has to happen with blood. There's no other way. Prudence's father stood steadfast. I like Sovereign Dandridge's idea of a massive tax revolt. using nonviolent resistance to cripple the king's treasure chest. But how can we get enough subjects to risk their lives and do it? Patrick questioned.
It has to be in everyone's best interest, and important enough for them to take a risk. As far as I know, we're the least taxed subjects in the world. So taxes alone won't be enough here. This would have to come down to an issue of control. The king will not be able to maintain control much longer since he is so far away. There's also no representation, but folks still have to pay taxes to some other land. The way to change people's hearts is to sell the idea that they should be in control of their own lives, not some government,
Archibald responded. The men argued until the dawn, much to their wives' and daughters' dismay, about if such a thing as a nonviolent revolution could ever occur. It was still hot, even in mid-December. Although some of the leaves had turned and fallen, some of the more robust foliage was still holding tight to their colors. Despite the heat, a cold snap in November killed most of the sand gnats and mosquitoes, a small blessing to all man and beast. Patrick had a face full of fully grown beard, and Archibald followed his lead by growing a mustache, though it was still hot enough for him to have to take off his wig when they were smithing. The twins were growing tall and lean, and Heather and Marion seemed not to age a single day anymore. During this strange and balmy winter, Archibald quietly taught Patrick the art of gunsmithing. It was an ideal time to teach, since so much gun work was coming in. Many repairs and modifications were being made in preparation for the anticipated Spanish and Savage invasion, so the making of stockpiles of guns openly aroused no suspicion. Taking advantage of the situation, the smiths worked long hours into the night, crafting extra black market firearms. During his tutelage, Patrick found the most difficult aspect of gunsmithing a smoothbore firearm was the barrel. It took great skill in fabricating to get it smooth, even, and straight. The lock was disassembled into its parts: hammer, trigger, springs, and flash pan. Patrick would delicately disassemble the flintlock and copy each part one by one. He would first take the hammer and set it in a clay sand mix to make a mold. He then would pour molten iron into the mold and created a close replica. He then would file and shape the hammer to the exact dimensions of the original. He repeated this process until all the parts of the gun were finished, but the barrel could not be cast. Archibald would cut a pattern from a sheet of metal and hammer it around the rod. Once he had the shape of the barrel, the master blacksmith would heat the barrel in the fire and fuse the ends together. He used long straps of metal to force the edges together and then heated the barrel to just before its melting point. It took a very experienced eye to do this. Before the barrel would be cooled in a pool of water, Archibald poured small drops of hot metal into any cracks that did not fuse. When it completely cooled, the master blacksmith used a tool he designed that looked like a file on a stick. He'd file the inside of a gun barrel for hours until it was smooth as glass. The gun stock was made from any hardwood the blacksmith could get his hands on. Oak was the most common choice, but Archibald would also take custom orders for anything. The twins would work whittling the oak down to the basic stock, and Archibald would step in and do the finishing. He even customized the gun stock by shaving down the grip, a trick he had learned from local savages. With the modified thinner grip, the musket could now be held in one hand and used as a club when the ammo ran out. With troops and mercenaries amassing in Savannah, Yamacraw, Uchis, Creek, and Chickasaw war parties were all camping on the outskirts of town. The secret of Governor Oglethorpe's invasion was not a secret anymore. Even Hugh Mackay's Highlanders, including William McIntosh, were in town dressed for war. A mixed force of British regulars, the 42nd Regiment of Foot, and the colonial militias from Georgia and Carolina were also added to the mix. 5 frigates and 3 sloops were also gearing up for war in the harbor. When William McIntosh arrived in Savannah, he headed directly to the blacksmith's home. "Is Duncan here, lad?" The large kilted man asked Patrick. "Who?" Patrick was puzzled. "Oh, right. Excuse me. I meant his English lord, Sir Archibald," McIntosh stated in a sarcastic tone. "He'll be back in an hour or so. Do you have a message?" Patrick calmly stated as he continued his work.
Yes, tell him that the target is St. Augustine, and to prepare quickly. We ride out in 4 days to attack Fort San Diego on our way to our prize. Tell him to get everything into place,
Scott instructed. Patrick nodded, and the Scottish warrior ran down the street to join his men. Later, Patrick took the message to Archibald, who in turn passed it to Heather. He instructed her to tell Prudence's father to get his savage ready, and to join the men west of San Diego in 7 days. Archibald explained everyone's role in the family's next endeavor at dinner.
Sons, you have to stay here and watch the home. If I need something important, I want Max to deliver the message.
Amos frowned with disappointment.
Sorry, Amos, but Max can outrun you since you cut your foot.